right, let's go. So thanks, Franz, to be here with me. So let's go for this new episode of Partnership 0 to 1. This time in English.
Appreciate it.
I like cross finger, and I hope I will be clear when I will speak. So today the topics. Hello everyone and welcome. So today's the topics will be how agencies help Hopin scale from $0 to $7 billion. In this episode, we will explore why Hopin launched an agency program and the challenge it solved, how they built and scaled the program from partner acquisition to activation, and key results and lesson learned by Franz. Thank you for joining us today. Franz, you are head of partnership at Opus and previously at Hopin. Maybe can you introduce yourself in 2 minutes with partnership focus and tell us about your current activity?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Hippo, and bonjour, partnership. That's about as much French as I have. Like I chose Latin in school and I still regret it. I wish I would have learned more French. And also Hippo told me...
It's a good start. It's a good start.
I got at least away with that part, yeah. One thing I want to call out is that I'm based in San Francisco, so it's 9 a.m. in the morning and it's 6 p.m. in France. And if you're watching this live, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know first day, Hippo told me, it's like the most important drinking day and like the most important social day of the week in France. So if you're watching this right now, I really appreciate it. You have your priorities straight. And if you're watching the recording, I also appreciate it.
And I hope like our people are maybe on online and they have a beer on the one hand and the webinar on the other.
Yeah. If you send us a picture of you with the beer and the webinar, like I'll send you a book. Don't worry about it.
Let's go. Wow, incredible proposition.
In terms of my background, I'm Franz. I head up partnerships here at OpusClip. OpusClip is an AI video. So what we do is we turn long form video into short form videos. So if you have a podcast or a webinar like this episode, for example, I'm definitely going to put it into OpusClip because it gives me the top clips where I would say these are the 1 minute bits, which would do really well on LinkedIn or TikTok and so forth. We have around 10 million users, and I was brought in to manage our largest partnerships. So that's strategic alliances with large social media platforms like LinkedIn and YouTube and others who we work with closely, as well as figure out our B2B agencies and so forth. But today we want to talk about Hopin, which is the company I worked at. So previously I was at Hopin and StreamYard, which is a virtual event. So Hopin was a very small business at the time when I joined. I joined in March 2020 when we had around 16 people and we were doing virtual events. So we were hosting, you can imagine a gathering where you have a stage, then you have like breakout room, and then you have like one-on-one, which is kind of like chat roulette, all in one platform. And that was already very popular before the pandemic. So we already raised $5 million before we even, launched. But what happened is that when the pandemic struck, every single event around the globe had to move online. You can imagine like we went from, having like a couple dozen customers to having, 1,000 leads coming in every single day. Initially, everybody who wasn't building the product had to sell the product. So everybody was having 20 sales calls a day, back to back, just trying to like send out contracts. We were making money handoffs, like each one of us was making millions of dollars on the sales side. But it was just we just could not keep up with the demand because there were just so many people coming in. And we also had to service them. Like once we sold them, we had to actually like provide services afterwards to like onboard them, make sure the events are running well and so forth, because that was really important for us as well. Because if people would realize that the product doesn't work or if the services were poor, they would tell everybody else and actually our lead flow would dry up, which is exactly what happened to some of our competitors. And so for us, it was pretty clear that like we needed a lot of people on board and hiring was not fast enough. One evening, I realized that 25% of our inbound leads were agencies. Like, it was actually not me. It was my colleague, Augustine, who pointed out. I was like just on a dozen sales calls and he was like, did you realize that there's a lot of agencies reaching out to us? And in that moment, it really clicked for me that these agencies had a ton of capacity, a lot of people they hired for these in-person events, and they didn't know what to do. And so in that moment, it really clicked like, hey, the way to convert thousands and thousands of inbound leads every day is through agencies. We're not going to do this ourselves. We're going to go through partners. And that's how I got started in partnerships.
Smart.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And yeah, I have a ton of question before I ask you some question about Hopin. you write a book, the book on partnerships. I read it, and with partnership team. Yeah, I know that Alex read it too, and yeah.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, like I got my start in partnerships out of necessity because we had so much inbound that we need to figure out how can we convert all that inbound and how can we service all of it. Afterwards, more and more people come to us. We had tech companies come to us who were like, can we partner? And because my title was head of partnerships, everybody just sent them to me. So I just got all these inbound requests from from alliance partners. At some point, we were talking to Google and we were talking to LinkedIn. LinkedIn, for example, actually invested in Hopin as well. That was an investment of up to $50 million. So that just shows you like the power of partnerships. The LinkedIn partnership was very different from like the agency partnerships. Over the last 4 years, I talked to hundreds of different like partnership leads, trying to figure out like how do you actually work with all these different types of partnerships, and try to like unravel this like hairball of partnerships and try to figure out like, okay, what are the 5 or types of partnerships that people might encounter as a startup. But that all was summarized in a book. It's called The Book on Partnerships. You can get it on Amazon in France as well. We actually have French reviews, which I appreciate a lot. In the Book on Partnerships, it's a startup guide to partnerships for people who know nothing about partnerships. So it starts very basic, like what is a partnership? What type of partnerships exist? And how can you win with each one of them? And I know today we wanted to talk specifically about channel and agencies, so I want to focus on that, but I can also talk a little bit more about the basics to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Cool. Thanks for this this intro. Yeah, I totally recommend your books. And previously, I totally recommend OpusClip because this is a tool I use to create my own shorts for my LinkedIn post.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, I love the tool because one thing is I have a link. I upload on OpusClip. It creates automatically all the like 30 clips, something like that, and I can manage directly with the text. So yeah, it's really it's really efficient. Yeah, efficient.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate this tool.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good rule of thumb. Maybe like outside of partnerships, but if you're looking for a new job at a company, like at a startup, I always recommend to look at startups where you can actually use the tool. I host a bi-weekly like live show called The Partnership, where I interview partnership lead. And that was because I worked at StreamYard, which is this little duck here. That's our logo. And it's a live streaming tool. So I wanted to like interview people every 2 weeks to like get to know our tool and like understand it better, like live like our customers. And through that, I found OpusClip because I was looking for a way to like chop up my live streams. And then, it was a pretty seamless because now I use OpusClip still every 2 weeks to chop up my own show and chop up any webinars. It's very helpful if you actually use the tool that you work for, because that way you can actually live like your customers, and it answers a lot of questions that customers and partners might have.
This is a good tips to find a job. Like find a job on the tool and or product or service that you love, and you will love your job.
Yeah, exactly.
So here we go. Let's go to discuss about Hopin.
Mm-hmm.
So you put like the situation before launching the agency. So, but just one question. Hopin, European
Yes,
based in
we were based
UK,
out of London.
In London, yeah. And after you moved to USA.
To the US, yeah.
So yeah, can we maybe like deep dive on the like what was the situation of the agency program? So you said it was like before the COVID crisis, and you have a ton of leads, and you detect that there is some like 20% there is agency. So how you detect it? What was the way of thinking?
Absolutely. There are a couple of ways to detect agencies. So the first one was they will tell you, like we were on these calls and these agencies were like, oh, we're an agency. Second of all, in our sign-up form, we actually had a tick box and asked, are you an agency? And the reason you want to do that is, one, because the business model of an agency is different from your customers. Like an agency makes money using your product, while a customer might use your product to solve a specific business need. And so there's a difference between how these customers like will operate, like an agency versus like a traditional customer. What we also discovered, which I thought was really interesting, is that we will probably, your company will probably work with a lot of agencies already, you just don't know about. And this is something which I call the shadow partner program. So what happened in the case of Hopin, that once we realized agencies could be really helpful for us, we had a couple of leads, like a couple of agencies who were like, oh, you should build a program. Like they literally asked us for a program where we can support them, certify them, and so forth, because they wanted to become certified agencies. But then we also talked to our customer success team and like, hey, we're thinking about starting an agency program. Do you know any agencies, or what do you think of the idea? And then the customer success program was like, oh, you should talk to Franco and Tina. And it turned out that the customer success people already were working with agencies, because what the agencies did, which I thought was very smart, when they had a customer who used Hopin, would work with the customer success person of that customer and just ask them like, hey, I'm doing services for this customer of yours, and like, can you help me set up and stuff like that? And then it would be friendly with them and just say like, hey, if you have anybody else who needs help with, getting set up on Hopin, just let me know and I can implement that for you as well. The customer success team already created like an informal partnerships program with like a handful of agencies. They wouldn't call it like that, but they were just like, oh, these are people who we outsource. And so I thought that was like fascinating as well, because it's a very strong signal that there is an opportunity for you to build an agency program. If you don't have a shadow program, it's kind of tricky to understand, like, is this the right fit for agencies? Will agencies make enough money for and so forth? So we can talk a little bit about like how to know whether there's a good fit. But the strongest signal you can get is that agencies are already asking you for it and are already working with you. That's a really big signal. And then there's another trick which we did as well, which was fascinating. For a lot of our customers, like let's say Google, we would go into the back end of their account and we would look for all the email addresses in the back end. And everybody had like an at google.com email. And then somebody all of a sudden had like, agency.com email address. And so you're like, oh, wow, like that is an agency which is providing services for Google. And so you then email this person and go like, hey, I see you're providing services for Google. Is there anything we can help with? And also, do you have other customers like Google that we could work with? And all of a sudden, because they're working with Google, there's a high chance that they're also working with other tech companies like Salesforce and LinkedIn and Microsoft and so forth. And so these agencies can be like incredible advocates that, well, to just like expand your reach and go for these large companies as well. Because that's the hardest part, is like figuring out which agencies to work with. And the ones you already work with are the best agencies versus like agencies which are complete unknowns and you don't know if they're actually going to do well with your customers.
Okay, so your tips is when you have to launch your own like partnership or agency, first is to talk with your customer success manager, because they know the different customer and maybe like find some like typology of partner, such as agency.
Yeah.
Or you will target directly with the customer success, who are our best clients, who are our best customer, and try to find like with what type of partner they work with. So yeah, to sanitize if you discuss with customer success, you will automatically and your customer, you will automatically find all your you will understand who is your ecosystem and who are your.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the main takeaways, and we go into very big detail in this in the book as well, is like how to find the right partners. But the number one signal you can have on whether somebody could be a good partner for you is whether they already have customers with you in common. And so if they already have overlapping customers, that's a really big signal. They're already working with customers and your tool, which means they understand your customer base, they understand your tool, and they're already doing a great job. That's the number one signal you should be looking for. Everything else is like, okay, you can do market research, whatever. But like the only way to know if somebody's going to do well as an agency partner of yours is if they're already doing well with as an agency partner. So like they already have overlapping customers. And so you should really look out for that. Talk to your CX team, talk to your support team, talk to your sales team. Just figure out like which agencies do they know already, who are they working with already? And then also go into the back end and do the hard work of like looking for your top accounts and figuring out if they work with agencies.
Okay. Yeah, super clear. And okay, so you have identified all the agencies. How do you structure your proposition to convince this agency? So you arrive to the call to discuss, and you say like, okay, we already work with discuss A, B, C, D, but all you will structure your proposition.
Yeah, a great example would be language support. And Hopin, we didn't have a French team. And so if we had French customers who were like, we need French customer support, we need French, onboarding support and so forth, we were like, that's not us. But we had agencies in France which we would just send them to and just be like, the agency can do this in French for you. So that's a great example of like, they might be providing the same service as you, but they're doing it in French. And that's like a whole game changer. That like the customers want somebody who understands like the language, but also like the cultural nuances that you might deal with if you're hosting an event in France, for example.
Yeah,
Then
and
the
in
last
this
one,
way, it allow you to open a market, and to don't have to be in the market. So don't have to have like people on or an office in France, but create a partnership with local
yes,
agency. You have the language,
absolutely.
you have the culture, and they own the contacts, and they automatically know how to distribute your products in the market.
Yes, so that's a really important pick. There are different ways to slice and dice this, and we can go into this, like, what is it that the partner provides, and like, how do you make sure that you don't get into, because that's the biggest challenge with agencies, is that you and the agency actually like have overlapping value propositions for a customer, and then you start competing for business, not what you want to end in. You want to end in a way where the agency does one thing, or like services, for example, you do the other thing, like technology. Then the two of you have like a very strong joint offering, which doesn't compete with each other. The way to look at it is like, what's the value for the customer? What's the value for the partner? And what's the value for your company? In that order. Normally what people do is they think about like, what's in it for me? What's in it for the partner? And then I'm sure the customer will pay for it. And that's like a recipe for disaster, because that way, like, the customer is the one who actually is the one making the decision on whether this partnership works. You two are just like, hoping that you have a good joint value proposition. And those partnerships are called Barney partnerships. I don't know if you ever watched like a children's TV show with like Barney, the purple dinosaur. Everybody holds hands and sings and like is really happy that they have such a great value proposition. But the customer doesn't care. They don't care if you two like each other. It has to be a good fit for the customer as well. And so, yes, it has to be like valuable to the customer, to the partner, and to you as a company. The next thing to look out for when you are drafting like your value proposition or your pitch to an agency is to figure out what the business model of the agency is. So I want to give a shout out to Hans-Peter Beck, who wrote a great book called Building Successful Partner Channels. He goes into very big detail, like a very great detail on just how to figure out whether there is a potential for channel conflict and how to get ahead of it. And the advice he gave was that you should look at a framework called the business model canvas. You can Google this. It's very popular. Like if you ever done any startup accelerator or something, like they all will talk about the business model canvas. But in the business model canvas, we discuss things like, what does a business charge for? Where do their leads come from? What is their unique competitive advantage, right? What is their cost structure? Like, what do they pay for? All those things are really important to understand, because if an agency's business model is to compete with you on price, then you're going to fail. Like we had this with Hopin, where, for example, we would charge a customer $20,000 for a virtual event. And then if they bought it for the agency might have a discount. The agency might only charge, $15,000 because they're buying so many virtual events from us. And then what the agency does is they obviously turn around and go to the customer and like, oh, you can get it from us for $15,000 versus at Hopin it's $20,000. So obviously, like, you should buy it from us because it's cheaper. If their business model for acquiring customers is to undercut you and your pricing, you're going to fail. Like that's not how they should make money. How they should make money is by selling additional services around your software that provide, value to the customer that you can't offer. So in the Hopin case, like I said, like French customer support is a great example of like something that the agency can offer, which we don't offer. And so we might charge $20,000, and then the agency might charge another $20,000 for like French onboarding and French setup and like AV production, like doing the audio visual and the camera live streaming. And so now the agency made 20, we made 20, everybody's happy. And that's a great example of, how you can avoid channel conflict by understanding your partner's business model and making sure that the way they make money is different from the way you make money.
Okay, Claire. And do you have like maybe like a specific success story of, for example, one agency, just to understand like what was the proposition and how do you discuss with them like about like acquisition, onboarding, certification, and activation? Yeah, just to understand like all the partner value proposition and all the process to understand. Yeah, one success story.
Yeah, definitely. Again, the way to avoid channel conflict is to segment, right? So you have to go like very clear with the agency. You have to say like, these are the kind of customers you can go after, and these are the customers we are going to go after. And one example we mentioned is language. So we work with an agency in Germany called Smart Events. I met the founder like during the early days of the pandemic. And what happened was that they were doing a lot of in-person events originally in Germany, and they laid off like their 10 employees they deregistered their cars and basically had to close up shop, where they were about to close down the business, which they've run for a long time already. But when we talked about virtual events, it became clear that this might be an opportunity for him to just pivot his business entirely. And so the value proposition for him was that he would be able to expand beyond his regional event now, but actually host bigger events for larger clients by becoming like the thought leader in virtual events. For him, is we would train him. So because I'm German, this was easier because I could, come up with materials together with him. But he would basically translate a lot of our training materials into German and would provide German onboarding, training, so forth, AV, and all of that for German customers as well. We would also certify them. This was something which was very important to partners. They wanted to be certified partners. We gave them little Hopin certified badges at the end of it. But we had a whole week, which was like the Hopin Academy, where partners would go through and learn how to use the platform to the highest possible standard. What's really fun is that this is basically the same training you do for your customer success team. So you can save a lot of effort by actually just figuring out how you can make the customer success training public facing for partners. It saves a partner a lot of time as well, because they hired a lot of people. Like, he went from furloughing 10 people to having a team of over 45 people after like a year or so of working together. So he 4x'd his business because he worked with us. Our academy was his onboarding. Is his onboarding, like his training for his new employees, was actually just putting them through the Hopin training because it was so extensive. What happened with them, which was like really fascinating as well, was that the agency owner decided to go all in on Hopin. They did not sell any of our tool, which I thought was very important as well. He only sold Hopin. He basically became Hopin Germany. Like he was synonymous almost with Hopin Germany. So sent him all of our German deals because we were just like, this is going to be much more efficient if you sell them and if you service them. And by going all in, his team became super, super specialized. So they would come up with like solutions to problems that we didn't even know about. Like they would hack the platform to the point where they could install things and do things that our team didn't even know were possible because they were just so aware of how to use the platform. It was also really helpful for us because they hosted in the end like around 400 events a quarter. So they hosted like hundreds and hundreds of events, which was insane. But what happens there is that if somebody uses, your platform for 400 events and like just power uses it like, 12 hours every day, his team had incredible feedback for us. Because if somebody has to push a button, which is kind of like silly, it's like way too much like to push this button, but you don't care because you want to do it once, you're not going to give that piece of feedback to the product team. But if you do this every day for 400 customers, you're going to be like, this button is useless. Like this process needs to be better, right? And so you kind of start shaving off all these inefficiencies, which was really helpful as well because they became such great the partners for us and gave such great feedback. And so I think that was a really big success story where we saw the value of working with this partner, and especially working with a smaller partner who was kind of non-obvious. Like we often think that you have to work with the biggest agencies, but the biggest agencies have hundreds of products that they sell. So getting the attention of the sales rep and like training their team is such a pain because they also need to like know all the other products. And every time they send you send them a customer, they have all these other products in mind where they're like, oh, they could use Hopin, but they could also use, this other tool. Mm-hmm. And that is like not great for the relationship, and it's not great for the speed at which you can operate, because it just creates so much friction by having all these other options that people consider. Versus for them, every single person that came to them was just like a Hopin customer, and so that allowed for a lot of efficiency as well.
Okay, cool. That was a smart move to work with them, and I understand that the huge problem is with huge agencies or huge like a kind of a system integrator. You have to be like constantly training, give a lot of news and updates about your products to be like top of mind, and just to like people and experts think about you to implement you in the clients. Maybe it's smarter to be like specific with one agency, create confidence, really good use case to after like replicate and have good like relationship to scale the business. We have one question. Normally I do the question at the end of the webinar, but I think like this one is like really pertinent. Charlotte asked like, how did you train the French agency if you didn't have a French speaking? This is a good question to open markets. And for example, if I want to go to in Germany, I don't speak German. Yeah, how do you train your French agency?
That's a great question. The good news is that French people also speak English. Not everybody, but the agency owners, like some of his team members did, right? And so we worked together with them to come up with like French training material. And, they had access to our English materials as everybody else. But like a lot of times, like the first agency we worked with in the market did the extra work of like translating a lot of our training material and a lot of our educational and informational material into the local languages. This happened in France, this happened in Germany, happened in Israel. There was a partner who translated like our entire Hopin help center into Hebrew as well for their customers, because they were so frustrated that they had to do all the support for the customers. So they were just like, okay, there's a Hebrew version of the help center, right? Which is a lot of work. So you want to make sure that you also reward the partner correctly, right? You want to make sure that they also get like some preferential treatment or something out of this, effort of translating your materials. That being said, I think it's important to recognize that you shouldn't just have one agency per market. Because if you have one agency per market, there's first of all a risk that they go off the rails. Like they might be bad, just like frankly, like they might just be not good at their job, right? And then the second one is that they create a monopoly. So at some point they might start dictating prices. They might think that they're exclusive with you, right? They might, provide poor customer service because, who else are the customers going to go to? And that's a situation which you always want to avoid. And so yes, you should pick winners. You probably don't have to work with like hundreds and hundreds of agencies for each market, but you should probably also work with more than one, because you don't want to create partner concentration. You want to make sure that, there is healthy competition between the partners, that if, a customer can ask you about an agency, you can send them like at least 2 or 3, and then they can get proposals from different agencies. The agencies can compete on price and so forth. And then the customer wins. And the agencies win because more customers are going to use their services because they're doing a better job.
Okay.
That's a great question. I think for a lot of our agencies, they were the first line of support. So you can think of support in 3 levels, right? There's the first line of support, which is the agency. And so they are the ones who are talking to a lot of the customers directly and resolving a lot of the issues. Then there's a second line of support, which would be like a customer success manager or a partner success manager and a partner account manager and so forth, like somebody who's directly responsible for the partnership. And so we had a whole team of partner success managers or partner account managers who were in charge of that. And then there's a third line of support, which would then be actually the product team, engineering team and stuff like that. Agencies, if they're successful, will manage like hundreds of customers, which means they're a great way of, selecting through a lot of requests, because they can already if you enable them well, they can already handle the requests so you don't have to. The second one is to have like a clear communications channel with your partner account manager. So that could be through a PRM or a portal where they can submit questions, or in the beginning, frankly, it's just going to be like a Slack channel where you and the agency are going to communicate, right? Just make sure that it's clear, okay, what are the things that the agency can send you and what are the things that the agency should be able to handle. And then, your partner account manager is going to be the one who then filters questions further back to the product team if they feel like, they are not equipped to handle certain questions as well. And so I think that is important, because if you don't have that in-between layer of the partner account manager in between, your product team is just going to be overwhelmed by the agency. Because on the other side of the agency, they're 40, 50 people and they're working with hundreds of customers. And so you need to make sure that you streamline those requests. And then the other thing which is important as well is to set up clear incentives and to also set up quarterly business reviews to make sure that you check in regularly with agencies and explain to them hey, here's how you're doing. And here's how you're doing compared to everybody else. What are the other agencies doing? How many leads are they sending us? Are you in the top 1%? Are you in the top 20%? Or are you in the bottom 25%? And that's important as well, because that should give the agency an idea of how important are they to you. Because they obviously want a lot of attention from you, but if they're in the bottom 25% and they're not sending you a lot of leads, they're not going to be that important to you. And so that's important to communicate with them as well. It's if we work more together and you are, contributing more to this relationship, then you're going to get more perks, you're going to get more attention from us. And so that brings me actually to another really interesting topic, is tiering. So a lot of companies will have a tier. They will be you're a gold partner because you're top 20%. And then you are a silver partner and you're in the middle. And then you're a bronze partner. You're not even metal because you're not doing well at all. The problem with that for startups is that all the agencies will want to be gold partners. And you don't want to mess up the relationship. So then you're okay, fine. We're going to slowly include more and more people in gold. And so that's not great, because then you just kind of become overwhelmed. It becomes meaningless as well. One thing which we found, which is really interesting, and it's also recommended in the book, Building Successful Partner Channels, is instead of tiers, create awards. Maybe every quarter or maybe every year, you have a mini award ceremony. Could be in person, could be online, where you bring all your partners together and you have a couple of things that you want. So the most responsive agency, the one which drives the most leads, the one which hosts the most creative events, some of the behaviors you want to encourage. And then you pick your winners. You say this is the one which is the most creative agency. And then you explain why, you explain what they did, which was really good. The agencies love it because being an award-winning agency is a way to differentiate from everybody. And so you have a lot of award-winning agencies, and agencies like value these awards. But on the other
That's
side,
a really
what you
cool
do as
idea,
well
but
is that you like also encourage the good behavior from the other agencies. So you go like, this is what good looks like. Now you have to also be like that if you want to win an award next year.
okay, that's really cool idea to organize like awards at the end of the year. Do you erase the program with like tier 1, 2, 3 gold, silver, and bronze, or you erase it and just like keep awards, or this is just like an additional program for a partner program?
Yeah, this is partnerships 0 to 1. So ideally, you don't even have the gold, silver, bronze yet. Like ideally, you're just starting out. You have like 10 agencies. Maybe then you grow from 10 agencies to like 30, 40. And that's a great time to introduce these awards, because then you don't have to like mess with tiers and stuff like that. You don't have to like, like figure out, like help. Like you don't have to like spend time on thinking for the tiers and structure, whatever. You just say like, we have awards. Awards are much less defined than tiers as well. So you don't have to be as like, thorough. You can just pick the agencies where you're like, these are doing a really good job. And that's a great way of signaling like, this is what we want from you. We want you to behave like these partners. So I would say like as 0 to 1, like awards are a better way to start than tiers. But once you like obviously break into like the hundreds or thousands of agencies that you work with, like eventually you will need like a more robust partnerships structure with tiers.
Okay. Yeah, clear. That's a good idea. Have you ever to come between that?
So between partner agencies with each other, or between us and the partner agency?
Because like we always like hear about like channel conflict or like conflict between like agencies. For example, I have a customer. How do you choose the good agencies? You have two agencies who send you the same customer. Like how do you solve the relationship between two agencies, and how do you solve like conflicts? Is that clear?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think there's 2 types of channel conflict. One is between 2 agencies, and the other one would be between you and the agencies. Between 2 agencies, I think there you just need to be very clear in communicating. You need to be clear that, for example, in Germany, there's no exclusivity. Like everybody can go after whoever they want. We're not going to like give preferential treatment unless we explicitly say they are preferred because they, for example, are the award-winning agency or they're doing an extra good job. What will happen over time is that your account executives and your customer success managers will prefer certain agencies. So they will be like, oh, this agency always does a good job, so I'm always going to send them leads. That's not the ideal situation, because that way, like an agency accumulates a lot of customers and it like, become very big with you together. And then ultimately they might they might get into a position where they have a monopoly again on the market. And if they have a monopoly on the market because they work with all your customers in that specific area, they're going to start negotiating like, on price. They're going to like, start cutting corners on services. They're going to just like have a poor quality service for customers. And overall, like monopolies should just be avoided for that reason. And so I think a healthy conflict is important between your agency partners. It just needs to be clear, like what are the rules of the game? Like it needs to be understood by everybody that, there is conflict. There is going to be competition as well. So I think between agencies is less conflict. It's more just healthy competition that you should be aiming for. And you achieve that by having clear ground rules. On this side where you compete with the agencies for business, that's a lot harder. That means that your business models aren't necessarily compatible, but they're actually conflicting. And so we had this once, like in the very beginning of our agency program, it almost killed the entire agency program. We had one agency, and this agency were very large. They had developers on staff. They wanted to partner with us for some of the biggest clients, but they always pushed for exclusivity. They always said, like, if we work with this big company in this one region, then we want to work with them in all regions. But that made no sense to us. Like if you work with, let's say, it's just for example, if you work with Google, in France, you shouldn't be entitled to work with Google Japan, Google US, and Google like in all other regions, right? And so clearly that was not going to happen. But they just kept on pushing for it. They just kept on saying, like, we want exclusivity with these customers. And what happened is we did a couple of events together, and customers were just not happy. Like after the event, they would come to us and say like, hey, can I buy from you direct? I don't want to buy from this agency. And because the agency was trying to sell them on all kinds of stuff, like all kinds of services and additional offerings that they didn't need. And so from us, they would have gotten the product for 20K, but from the agency, they would have had to pay 100K just because there was all kinds of stuff the agency was bundling in. And so clearly like customers didn't want to work with them. They didn't see the value they were getting from the agency. So if you think about the value triangle, like the customer and we were both getting like a good value out of the relationship, but the agency just wasn't contributing. Their business model was to like capture customers, then try to squeeze them by like bundling all kinds of stuff in that they didn't need. And so what happened in the end, which was even crazier, is that the agency was really unhappy about this relationship with us. It was clear that it was not going anywhere. But instead of breaking off the relationship, they decided that they wanted to compete with us and build their own product. And so they wanted to build their own version of Hopin, which was insane. Like, I mean, you can do it. Like, obviously, everybody who wants to build virtual events platforms can do it. But what they did is they pretended to be a Hopin agency, sell Hopin to customers. Then when the event came around, they were like, oh, Hopin is not responding, or their tool is not good. You should use our tool. And so they tried to bait and switch. They were like, we're selling Hopin, but in reality, in the background, they were selling like a poor quality. And so we found out about that like immediately because the customer was not buying it. Like the first customer they tried to do this with immediately reached out to us and was like, this is weird. Like, why are these agencies doing it? And so in that moment, we cut off the relationship immediately, terminated our partnership, made sure that the customers sorted, even though they had, unfortunately, like a very poor experience in the beginning, but the event went great. But that was a clear example of why it's so important to understand how your partners are making money. Like, what's their business model? Because this agency's business model was to squeeze customers to provide as low quality service as possible and to make sure that they quickly capture a customer and then never let them go. And that's not how you do good business. You do good business by providing a lot of value. And that's the kind of customers you should be aiming for.
There is a framework. It's called like buy, build, partner. And they start with a partner, and after direction is buy or build internally, and the cutoff is the partnership. So in this way, as an agency, they try to get cut off and take all the value in building internally their own solution. Yeah, this is our decision.
It's interesting, like to your point of like the build by partner framework. We discuss it in the book as well. I think the agency wanted more control, and partnerships are not about control. Partnerships are about giving up control, right? You're giving up control in favor of speed. Like building their own solution would take forever. And frankly, they were not able to do it. So they never became a big competitor in this market. Right? But they thought that they could build it faster. And so like they thought that they would be able to compete with us instead of like just accessing a ready-made solution. And so they were willing to, trade off speed for control. They wanted to own the entire customer experience. And that's okay. Like they can do this. The thing which, was very questionable was just how they set it up. They misled customers by pretending to be one thing and then selling another.
And I have a question about the previous story. The way, in the way of, if we take like again this example of this agency, that the customer don't want to pay for the extra that they don't need with the agency and go directly to you. Say like, okay, I want to skip the agency. In the case where you have good relationship with this agency, you want to keep this relationship and this partnership. How do you manage, for example, this situation? Do you like, okay, let's go, I will manage directly the customer, or you will inform the agency to maybe like decrease or the value, just focus on the needs of the customer? How do you manage this kind of situation?
That's a great question because it's very sensitive. Agencies ideally want to make sure that they like maintain the book of business at all times. And they also ideally want to maintain the end relationship with the customers. That's a sensitive topic. The way we resolved it was that we preferred for customers to buy for us directly. There were examples of like cases where the customer would go for the agency and for us just because, like legal requirements and so forth. But generally, like the customer should buy directly with us, and then the agency should sell their services directly to the customer. And that way you didn't have like a murky relationship where like the agency is reselling your software, but then they're bundling it together with our services that we don't want and so forth. And so you gave the customer maximum flexibility. If a customer says like, hey, I don't want to work with the agency anymore, you should understand why. Like you should understand what is causing that. Like, is it a fundamental business model thing? Is the agency just not providing value? Is the way they're making money not compatible with how you want to make money? Or what could also happen is that maybe it was just a fluke. Maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe just had a bad experience. Agencies like they provide services. And so with services, you also have like some variability in terms of who's providing them. And so, with software, like it's kind of repeatable, like everybody's going to have roughly the same experience with your software because they get roughly the same version. But with agencies, like standardizing the service is much harder. So maybe it was a new hire, maybe it was somebody who was not as experienced who was providing the service, or maybe they just had a bad day, maybe where they were sick, maybe there's something going on in their personal life. And so that's just important to figure out as well. Was it a fundamental issue, or was it just like a variability, like something which might happen as a one-off?
Okay, it's super clear. Maybe like I do just a little break. If there are some people who have some questions, don't hesitate to write your question directly in the live stream chat, and I will and Franz will answer your question. 12 minutes left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just maybe like to understand about like the Hopin is only, I don't know if you know what is an Hopin situation. And now the 100% of indirect you say like now is like customer can buy directly. What is the repartition? What is the average of or percentage of partnership revenue for Hopin? Is it like 50-50 or 100% or 70% of the parts of the?
I can't talk to Hopin right now at the moment, just because Hopin got bought by Ring Central, which is a public company, and so I don't know about their situation. I also don't want to comment on it because that's obviously up to the team since I left as well. In terms of like the revenue split, revenue primarily came through directs. Like we generated up to $13 million in ARR through the partnership program, which is great. But Hopin's revenue overall was over 100 million. So you can imagine it was never like 50-50 as a whole. That being said, the services side, it didn't take long for us to realize that we should not provide services in-house. And so initially we had like a team of event services and people who like did all the onboarding and all the support and so forth. And over time, it just became clear that we were not in the services business. This was very labor intensive, and it was also very seasonal. So events, especially, like you can tell, like most of the events will happen in like, in the fall, for example, or in spring. But like winter and summer are kind of dead for events because people like generally don't want to be inside of like a stuffy area, like room, or they're on Christmas break. And so because of that, like it became clear pretty quickly that like we should outsource as many services as we can to our partners. And so partners were providing the bulk of our services, especially at the end, once we learned that lesson. We had to learn it the hard way. We hired the event services who then felt threatened by partners. So that was another like interesting example of channel conflict, where the event services team was kind of like worried, like, okay, are these partners going to take my job? Similarly, partners, once we started hiring this, were like all confused about like, okay, is this going to mean like I'm not going to get any deals anymore because you're just like, out like bringing everything to event services? The lesson from Hopin was that event services or any kind of in-house services should probably only be provided to like the very, very top of your customer base. Every other customer who is like smaller than like your absolute like top customer should be, getting their services ideally through a partner or somebody who is, an outsourced collaborator, just because you don't want to have as many services on staff. And there's an interesting reason for that. The reason why you don't want to have as many services as part of your offering as a software company, because investors value revenue from software more than revenue from services, because software has a very high margin. So like software, if you sell like somebody another, virtual event, the margins would be like, 80-90% because we didn't have as much cost, running these virtual events. But if you sell services, they're very low margin because you have to pay people to do the service. You have to like sit them down, you have to train them, you have to like, pay salaries. Even if there's no business going on right now, you still need to pay salaries. And so because of that, investors normally look for software-based revenue versus service-based. And if they realize that your company has like 100 million ARR, which should normally like justify unicorn status of 1 billion evaluation as like 10x, if they realize that 100 million ARR and like 80% of that comes from services, they're probably going to discount it. They're probably not going to give you a $1 billion valuation because they know that these are like low margin revenue.
Okay, super clear. And you just arrived like a few months ago at OpusClip.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share some insight about your strategy at Opus, and are you replicate this kind of same strategy with agency and your learnings with agencies to the OpusClip strategy?
Yeah. That's a great question. I can't comment too much on OpusClip because we're still doing it. Like we're still in the middle of. But one thing I would say is that before you figure out partnerships and your indirect sales and your indirect services, you need to figure out your direct sales and your direct services first. So you need to figure out like, how are you selling to customers first, right? And so at OpusClip, we've created a new offering, which is targeted at like some of the largest media companies and creators in the world, which is a higher value offering than our self-serve plan. So that is technically very well suited for partnerships, like very well suited for, agencies or additional services and so forth. But before we can work with partners, we need to figure out like, how do we provide the services and how do we sell? Because you can't teach a partner how to sell and how to provide services if you don't know how.
Yeah,
and that's like an interesting lesson from Hopin as well. As like virtual events were all new, we had to learn first, like, what can go wrong? Like, what are the things to watch out for? Like, what are the checklists you need to create? Like, how do you onboard a customer and so forth? And then we can go to the partner and tell them. Because what happens otherwise is that you have this new cool tool and you go to a partner and say like, hey, we have this new tool. We don't really know how to sell it. We don't really know how to like, service it. Can you do it for us? And that's going to end as a disaster because the partner will like oversell. They don't understand it well. They might like undersell it. Like they might not actually like explain the value proposition well enough, or they might just do a bad job servicing it because they don't even understand how it works. And you're probably tinkering around at the back end and stuff like that. And so I'm very excited about what we're building in OpusClip. And I think there's a huge potential for partnerships, but right now the primary focus, which the team are focusing on, is like just figuring out a direct sales channel. We also have a couple other partnerships cooking, especially with like larger alliances and larger companies that I can't talk about right now, but there's a lot of exciting stuff happening on that side as well.
Okay, cool. And before to end, maybe our last question: do you have like do you have some tips to share for like just a newbie in partnership or person that like large strategy of partnership or?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no university course which teaches you how to do partnerships. There's no, like one resource, unfortunately, where you can just go to and you go like, now I know exactly what to do. The best way to learn partnerships is to look at what others are doing, talk to them, understand what's going on under the hood. Because oftentimes what happens is that, on the surface, it looks like they really have their act together. But then behind the scenes, there's like a ton of channel conflict and they're like actually like really frustrated with their partnerships. It's like, don't just trust the hype, but actually like talk to the individual people and understand what's going on. Like understand how that relates to your specific business, because not every business is equally suited for partnerships, and the same strategy might not apply for every business. I've done a lot of the like heavy lifting at the time by like talking to hundreds of people, like going to all these presentations, reading all the books and trying to like figure out how to do partnerships. And so if you're a newbie to partnerships, I do highly recommend you get the book on partnerships. Shameless plug. But I put in 140 different resources in over 50 interviews with partnership experts, which you can then use as a follow-up. So it's not just about reading the book. There's actually a whole bibliography where you can then go in and like for channel sales, for example, find 30 resources like blogs, presentations, webinars, and so forth, which you can then go into and like follow up. So this is really just a starting point for you, and you can then just expand on all the resources where needed.
Yeah, 100%. I think like there is no school of partnership. You can learn on LinkedIn, because now there is more and more people who post about partnership. There's other guys such as Will Taylor. Yeah. There's a lot of people in partnership. On my side, it's one of the best way to learn partnership. First thing, second, there's a lot of blogs. There's Crossbeam, Partnership Leader, is Partner Stack. The third thing is same. Discuss with people. Just ask questions. How you do this? How you do that? How you create your strategy? You will understand the culture, the way of thinking, the way of success, the way of fail, and you have the way of adapt for yourself.
Absolutely. I think you bring up an important point. Community is really important. Like having other people who are going for this right now is really important, because you can talk to them and like understand what's working for them, what's not working. And so, LinkedIn is a great resource. A lot of people like myself or yourself post on LinkedIn regularly. And I do appreciate what you're building with Partnership as well in France. A lot of what we are doing in partnerships is very US centric. So a lot of the people like you see in partnership leaders, etc., will be in the United States. A lot of them in Europe as well. I do appreciate that there's now a French community as well, because it shows you that it's not just a US thing, it's not just a UK thing, but there's actually like a global movement around partnerships as well.
Thank you for your support. It's important to be like connected to be connected in a community. With the case of partnerships, people learn with their peers because they discuss in the Slack. We have like more than 1,000 people, so they can discuss directly in the Slack channel. Their question meets people, and it's like a snowball effect. And as you say, like partnership is first like US centric, and we are convinced that it should be like local with your own language, adapted to your own situation. And I think like partnership is the future of business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think at the end there is no question. Franz, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for this for this episode and the preparation. I was super happy to do this episode and this webinar with you. I like what you do on LinkedIn. I like your book. So it was like a great pleasure to.
Yeah, likewise. Really enjoyed doing this webinar, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for enduring me in English as well. Really appreciate it.
And it was like a great exercise for me because like I'm not, as you see, like I try to do my best to be clear, to understand, to create a discussion. I think it was okay.
Well, yeah, it's great.
So thank you very much, Franz. For the next episode, 2 weeks, we will have Corina about ecosystem of content platforms such as Microsoft News, Facebook, Instagram, etc. It will be like really interesting to understand how this huge platform creates a partnership. Or have a great evening or a great day in US. See you soon. Thank you very much.
See you then. Bye.